Welcome back to Parliament this morning on this beautiful, beautiful Wednesday morning. It's a big day for our Ministry of Finance as they come together here, and they, of course, announce the national budget for 2017. You'll remember we were broadcasting before the midterm budget. We were here. That was around about October. And here we are to find out the full budget and to see if there are any changes in some of the hints that were given to us in that midterm budget at the end of last year. Well, let's talk to our guest, and we were joking off air. It feels like we've been standing here since October. We've been in this same position. It's always an absolute pleasure to be joined by Yunus Carrim, who is in the chair, the Minister of Finance, accounts to the Standing Committee of Finance. And of course, he's the chair of this committee, and it's Yunus Carrim. Always good to see you. Thank you so much for the time.
To you and to the viewers.
All right. So how does the Finance Committee process in the budget actually work through Parliament? I mean, let's give viewers a bit of an understanding.
Yes, well, to start off with, the Parliamentary Budget Office, which is an independent advisory service to the committees that deal with finance and budget issues, briefs us the day before the budget, which they did yesterday. And then the four committees, the Appropriations and Finance committees in both houses, then meet with the Minister after having heard the budget this afternoon, as with the public. We meet with him on a Thursday, that's tomorrow, and then we begin the process. The Money Bills Act provides a very strict time frame within which we must process the budget in the both houses, and the parliamentary committees have consistently held that the deadlines are far too tight. That's set out in the Act. And in fact, the Act itself, which was passed by Parliament, not the Executive, is a subject of a major review. And we hope to have finalized that review by October this year, so that next year, this time, we'll be operating within a Money Bills Act that provides for slightly better timeline so that Parliament can be more effective in its oversight role. Okay. So we get locked up, as it were, in a room, that's the four committees, and we begin to review the budget at 10 this morning. We're not allowed to exchange with the outside world on what we read, and then we obviously, from there, move on to the budget this afternoon, and the procedure I just set out to you.
Fantastic. Well, there you go. That gives us a little bit of a background understanding as to how the whole process works. Let's break it down a little bit, and there's some particularly two issues that I want to delve a bit into. First one being FICA. We saw some developments yesterday. Talk to us about this.
Yes, well, it's not directly related to the budget, but briefly, the President returned the bill to Parliament on the grounds that one of its provisions, that is the inspectors of the Financial Intelligence Centre, are allowed to carry out warrantless searches without warrants in certain limited circumstances. The President's lawyers argued that the scope within which the inspectors could operate was still too wide and unconstitutional. So it isn't a policy issue. We simply put the matter before an independent lawyer, Advocate Semenya, in our case, Parliament, but National Treasury also appointed senior counsel, and that was Jeremy Gauntlet. Both argued that the provision in the bill as it is constitutional. The committee had two choices, either to return the bill as is, back to the President for him to make a decision on, one of which is to refer the matter himself to the Constitutional Court, or the committee could decide, they argued, that it could clarify some uncertainties or any misunderstandings that might occur, and they even provided some appropriate wording. So what the committee did simply is take what Advocate Semenya and Advocate Gauntlet said and use that as a basis to effect some amendments around providing greater clarity that the inspectors are seeking to merely check that the provisions of the Financial Intelligence Act are adhered to. And secondly, what we did was to avoid any misunderstandings, made it very clear they do not pursue criminal action. If any such matter has to be pursued, it's by the South African Police Service and related security services. So that's what we essentially did. And yesterday we voted on it. Yeah. The matter will be referred to the National Assembly, and presumably by next week or the week after, the House will vote on the matter.
Okay, so that's an update on FICA, if people are following that quite closely. I want to delve into it deeply, but we can't, unfortunately, due to time. I want to talk more about the budget now. SARS, the question is, has SARS raised the money it's targeted for the year so far?
Well, firstly, with low growth rates at about 0.4%, revenues are obviously down. Yeah. The minister in the medium-term budget policy statement last October projected that there'll be a 23 billion rand shortfall for this financial year. And of course, the big question is going to be, he's still projecting to raise 28 billion rand additional revenue in the new financial year 2017-2018. So obviously everybody's interested to know how he will raise that money.
Taxes.
Yes. Well, there's various forms of taxes. Personal income tax makes up about 34-36% of the total taxes. VAT, value-added tax, about 26%, and corporate tax is about, I think, 17.8%. So obviously the public will be interested to know where he draws his additional revenue from and which form of tax.
I mean, it's a big shortfall, and I think South Africans are in for a tough ride. He's going to get that money, and unfortunately, we're the ones that he's going to get that money from. So, can we warn South Africans for quite a harsh budget coming our way?
Well, I'm not sure it'll be a harsh budget. It'll be budget knowing the minister and the ministry and treasury, appropriate to the times. Basically, you've got weak global growth. But on the other hand, what you're finding is that the price of commodities, and our economy is still substantially reliant on mining, is lifting. The drought is beginning to recede. There is some recovery in the global growth, so I think it'll impact on the prospects of growth. This current financial year, growth is projected around 0.4%. For the next year, according to the minister's budget policy statement last October, it's about 1.3%. So things will be better in that sense. But ultimately, the issue is we need economic growth. Yeah. And that's not the responsibility of government alone. Government has to work with business, with civil society, the trade unions included, to ensure economic growth. And we need consensus, a national consensus around growth. And of course, the minister is under some pressures. The ANC's Lekgotla set out radical economic transformation as the framework for this budget, and so did the Cabinet Lekgotla. And of course, in the State of Nation address, the President set out that we need radical economic transformation. So I think much of the money for radical economic transformation will come from a reprioritization of the existing budget and obviously additional sources of revenue, limited though they may be. And I think that essentially what the President said is that by radical economic transformation, the ANC and government mean a fundamental change in the structures, the systems, the institutions and patterns of ownership, control and management of the economy in the interest of all South Africans, but especially the poor, which is set out as mainly African and female. So that's the framework. It's not as if it'll dramatically happen overnight. In fact, aspects of the radical economic transformation are being implemented anyway. It's a faster, quicker, more decisive implementation. And I think the issue is to contain unnecessary expenditure, to be more efficient in spending, to reduce the levels of waste and mismanagement, to act against public servants who waste resources far more decisively in terms of the Public Finance Management Act and other laws. And it's also about ensuring that Parliament is far more effective, not just our committees in general, in exercising oversight of how money is spent by the respective ministers and departments.
All right, there you have it. That's that radical economic transformation that we're talking about. But to get on the same page with the presidency and the finance ministry, that is that partnership that we're talking about here. Thank you very much for talking to us. The chairman of the finance standing committee on finance, Yunus Carrim, talking to us here on Morning Live. It's a pleasure. Thank you. All right, quick break. A little bit late for the news, but it'll be after this. Do stay tuned.